Ancient wisdom tells us that true knowledge begins with understanding ourselves. This seemingly simple task presents one of life's greatest paradoxes. We walk through our days convinced we know exactly who we are, what we want, and why we behave the way we do. But do we really? Consider for a moment how often you've promised yourself you'd change a habit, only to find yourself repeating the same pattern days later. Think about the times you've been surprised by your own reactions, caught off guard by emotions you didn't know were lurking beneath the surface. These moments reveal an uncomfortable truth that most of us spend our lives avoiding. We are mysteries to ourselves, strangers inhabiting our own skin, performing a daily charade of certainty while fundamentally lacking true self-awareness. The journey toward genuine self-knowledge demands something most people find extremely difficult: to embrace profound humility. Not the false modesty we display in social situations, but something far deeper and more unsettling. This humility operates on two interconnected levels, both equally challenging to accept. The first dimension involves acknowledging the vast expanse of our ignorance about ourselves. We must confront the reality that despite living inside our own heads for decades, despite experiencing every moment of our lives from our unique perspective, we remain largely unknown to ourselves. This isn't a comfortable realization. Our egos resist it fiercely because admitting ignorance about something as fundamental as our own nature threatens the carefully constructed narratives we've built about who we are. You might think you understand yourself quite well. After all, you've been you your entire life. But then reality intrudes with inconvenient evidence to the contrary. You struggle with self-control in ways you can't fully explain. You harbor contradictory desires that battle within you. You make resolutions with absolute sincerity, watch yourself break them with equal consistency. You possess flaws you recognize, but seemingly cannot correct, patterns you observe, but cannot escape. These experiences should prompt a crucial question. If you truly knew yourself as well as you believe, wouldn't you have more mastery over your own behavior? The dissonance between what we think we know about ourselves and our actual conduct reveals just how profound our self-ignorance really is. Getting low enough in your estimation of your own self, understanding represents a genuine challenge. Our natural inclination is to maintain a certain baseline confidence in our self-perception. We need to believe we understand ourselves to function effectively in the world. Completely dismantling this confidence feels dangerous, even reckless. Yet reaching the bedrock level of humility necessary for true self-discovery requires us to descend further than feels comfortable. Knowledge depths of ignorance we've spent our lives pretending don't exist. Only when we fully grasp how little we actually know about who we are can we begin the real work of discovery. Here's where something remarkable emerges from this seeming despair. The second dimension of humility provides a counterbalance that transforms this journey from merely depressing to genuinely hopeful. If we are ignorant about who we currently are, we are equally ignorant about who we might become. The same lack of knowledge that humbles us also opens up vast territories of possibility. We don't know our limits because we haven't truly tested them. We don't know what we're capable of because we've never genuinely tried to find out. This ignorance about our potential becomes the silver lining that makes the darker discoveries bearable. The horror of confronting who we actually are today is offset by the thrilling mystery of discovering who we could be tomorrow. How does one actually begin this process of self-discovery? The method sounds deceptively simple. Observe yourself as though you were watching a complete stranger. Adopt the perspective of a detached observer studying an unknown subject. Listen to the words that come out of your mouth and analyze them with curiosity rather than judgment or defense. When you speak, ask yourself what kind of person would say such things in such a way. Pay attention to your emotional state while communicating. Does a particular mode of expression make you feel more powerful, or does it diminish you? Does it fill you with shame or boost your confidence? Are you presenting an authentic version of yourself or performing a character you think others want to see? Notice the stories you tell yourself and others. Are they true? Are they carefully edited versions designed to make you look better than you are? Do you catch yourself lying, not just to others, but to yourself? At social gatherings, do you adopt a particular persona calculated to impress and entertain, one that might come across as nothing more than self-centered narcissism to those observing you? These are uncomfortable questions. They're essential starting points for genuine self-examination. Dive deeper into the shadows. Fantasies occupy your mind when you're alone. What aggressive thoughts do you harbor that you would never admit to anyone? What are you truly willing to do when pushed, when comfortable civility is stripped away? Captures your genuine interest so completely that you pursue it without any external pressure or reward. Conversely, what do you consistently avoid? What tasks do you procrastinate on, and why? What responsibilities make you recoil? Understanding the things we won't do is often as revealing as understanding what we will do. Examine your value system with equal rigor. What do you genuinely consider good, and what do you label as bad? What accomplishments fill you with pride? What failures do you beat yourself up over? What challenges do you congratulate yourself for confronting? Obstacles do you berate yourself for failing to overcome? These questions are extraordinarily complex, far more intricate than they initially appear. The honest truth is that you don't know the full answers to any of them. Your conscious mind provides neat, socially acceptable responses, but the reality lurking in your unconscious is far messier, more contradictory, and infinitely more interesting. Acknowledging that you don't have clear answers to these fundamental questions about yourself is genuinely just the beginning of the journey. But it's an absolutely crucial first step because it strips away the comforting illusions that prevent real growth. Once you've established this foundation of humble self-awareness, you can begin exploring your potential, and much of that potential is discovered in places most people are afraid to look, in the darker aspects of the self. When you begin to understand the shadowy parts of your personality, you simultaneously discover your capacity for chaos and destruction. Sound ominous, even frightening, but there's genuine utility in this discovery. Understanding your potential for a mayhem actually strengthens you in ways that purely positive thinking never can. When you recognize the dangerous capabilities that lie dormant within you, when you acknowledge that you possess the capacity to cause harm, to be cruel, to destroy, this recognition can spark an important ambition. You can choose to integrate this dangerousness into a higher order personality structure rather than repressing it or pretending it doesn't exist. Incorporating your capacity for aggression and chaos into a mature, ethical personality creates something powerful: implacability. You become someone who can say no when necessary, someone who won't be pushed around or manipulated, who can stand firm when confronted with injustice or unreasonable demands. You become a person who won't avoid necessary conflict just because conflict is uncomfortable. This isn't about becoming cruel or aggressive. It's about having access to strength when strength is required. Person who has never acknowledged their capacity for darkness has no real choice. They can only be nice, only be agreeable, only be compliant. The person who knows their shadow can choose whether to be kind or fierce, depending on what the situation demands. This integration of your darker potential represents one avenue for discovering what you're capable of. Another crucial method involves setting incremental challenges for yourself, a process of continuous experimentation and growth. Think about who you were yesterday and compare that person not to who someone else is today, but to who you are right now. This comparison protects you from the paralysis that comes from measuring yourself against people at completely different stages of their journey. When you compare yourself to others, you'll always find someone who's further ahead, someone who makes your accomplishments seem trivial. But comparing yourself to who you were yesterday creates a sustainable framework for continuous improvement. Look honestly at your current situation and identify something that's not quite right, something you could improve. You should improve by your own standards and critically, something you would be willing to improve. Then set yourself a modest goal. Notice that word modest. This is important because most people set goals that are far too ambitious given their current state, then fail to achieve them, then use that failure as evidence that they're incapable of change. Imagine you're a university student who hasn't been studying at all. Perhaps you're working in an office and there's a stack of papers on your desk that you've been avoiding for a month. Every night you feel guilty about this avoidance, but the guilt isn't enough to make you confront the task. You know you should deal with it, but something stops you. Take a moment to acknowledge what's really happening here. You're being a coward about whatever challenges or complications might be hidden in that stack of papers. There's something in there you're afraid to face, maybe difficult decisions, maybe tedious work, maybe evidence of past mistakes. The fear keeps you paralyzed. Now, here's the crucial question: can you set a goal small enough that even your fearful, avoidant self could achieve it? Instead of deciding, tomorrow I'm going to completely deal with this stack of papers, which might trigger the same avoidance response, if you said, tomorrow I'm going to place this stack on my desk and glance through it for 15 seconds. 15 seconds. That's all. Can you manage that? This might strike you as absurd. After avoiding something for a month, best you can commit to is 15 seconds of exposure. It might seem like you're setting the bar pathetically low. But here's the reality. If you've been avoiding something for an entire month, you are demonstrably afraid of it. The situation might genuinely be that dire. Genuinely be such a coward about this particular thing that 15 seconds is actually a legitimate challenge. And yes, there's a blow to the ego in admitting this. It doesn't feel good to recognize yourself as someone who can only withstand 15 seconds of exposure to something you're afraid of. This recognition is another form of humility, equally important as the first. It's the humility of understanding that there are things you could and should improve. You know what, at least some of them are, and there are small, manageable steps you could take that would move you in the right direction. The real question then becomes, are you big enough to take those small steps? Are you capable of grappling with the fact that you're fundamentally flawed to the point where you need to break challenges down into almost childlike increments in order to manage them? The answer, hopefully, is yes. And this reality that we all have things we avoid, things we're afraid of, things we need to break down into tiny steps, this is essentially the human condition. The degree to which people have conquered their fears and limitations varies, certainly. You do occasionally meet extraordinarily disciplined individuals who seem to have mastered themselves in ways that appear almost superhuman. Upon closer examination, you'll find that most of these impressively disciplined people develop their capabilities through exactly this process: slow, incremental improvement, one small step at a time. The process works like this. You set a tiny challenge for yourself and ask, could I do this thing that would be slightly better than what I'm doing now? Then you actually try it and find out whether you can. If you succeed, you gain confidence and ask yourself, is there something slightly larger and more challenging I could attempt? You try that too, and you discover whether it's within your current capabilities. Generally, with consistent practice, you do get better. You can take on larger challenges. You develop capacities you didn't have before. You take responsibility for yourself. Part of what it means to carry yourself with dignity and confidence in the world, the key is engaging with the world at a level you can actually manage. When you're ignorant, biased, deeply flawed, and immature, which is where everyone starts, by the way, you don't want to take on more than you can handle. That path leads to failure, discouragement, often complete abandonment of the effort. But taking on something small enough that you have a genuine shot at victory, that's sustainable. That builds momentum. You can wrestle with a piece of reality that's appropriately sized for your current capabilities, achieve success, build from there. The first step in this entire process requires allowing yourself to be a fool. This is actually harder than it sounds because it involves a significant loss or even destruction of ego, specifically your arrogant ego. You have to admit that you don't know what you're doing, that you're not as competent as you've been pretending to be, that you need to start from a much more basic level than you'd like to admit. This admission necessarily involves the death of a certain kind of ego, the inflated self-image that's been protecting you from uncomfortable truths. But here's the critical insight. You need the loss of that arrogant ego because it's precisely what's been interfering with your forward progress. In mythological and psychological terms, this arrogant ego is part of the adversarial process that prevents genuine development. You're too proud of who you think you are to notice what you're actually like, and this prideful blindness makes real change impossible. You don't want to sacrifice the part of yourself that's clinging to delusions, because those delusions help you maintain a positive, albeit extremely fragile, self-image. They allow you to feel okay about yourself in the absence of genuine effort and accomplishment. This strategy is ultimately self defeating, and cannot be recommended. The alternative is to know yourself through observation and attention, watching yourself the way a snake watches its surroundings cold-bloodedly with no emotional reactivity, simply to see what's actually there. Symbolically speaking, this kind of observation doesn't allow what is wanted or desired to interfere with what is actually observed. You watch yourself as if you truly don't know who you are, because in a very real sense, you don't. This approach to self-observation is just the beginning. Once you've established it as a practice, you then challenge yourself continually to see how far past yesterday's performance you can push today and tomorrow. You experiment constantly with expanding not just the domains of your competence, but your ability to increase that competence. The upper limit of what you can achieve is proportional to the moral effort you invest in the process. The more your efforts are guided by the highest vision you can conceive, an alliance with the highest possible good you can imagine, the further you can develop. The more your actions are accompanied by truth in speech and deed, the more fully you'll develop your latent potential. Truth here means congruence between what you know to be right and what you actually do, between what you say and what you mean, between your stated values and your lived behavior. This alignment between inner truth and outer action creates the conditions for maximum growth. You also have to be willing to undertake this entire process as an adventure rather than a grim duty. This is essential because bearing this kind of responsibility is genuinely difficult. It's a hell of a thing. As they say, take full ownership of your development and your life. Pursuing this path takes you out of the ordinary, out of the comfortable conventions of conventional existence. It separates you from the herd. There's an alienation and isolation that accompanies this journey, a certain loneliness that comes from refusing to the easy answers and comfortable delusions most people settle for. Along with this isolation comes genuine sorrow. You'll grieve for the time you wasted, for the person you could have been, but weren't, for the opportunities you missed, for the ways you've failed yourself and others. This grief is real and shouldn't be minimized. Alongside the alienation and sorrow, you'll find something else, deep meaning. The kind of meaning that makes life feel genuinely worth living. The kind of meaning that can sustain you through difficulty and tragedy. If I'm smiling, the kind of meaning that comes from knowing you're living authentically, developing genuinely, becoming more than you were. And here's the final truth. There isn't anything better you can do with your life than this. No other pursuit offers the same combination of challenge and fulfillment. No other path provides the same depth of meaning. You can chase pleasure, comfort, status, or wealth, and you might obtain these things, but they won't transform you the way this process does. They won't give you the same sense that your life has been worthwhile, that you've honored the gift of consciousness, and the opportunity for growth. The complete answer to how we come to know ourselves and our potential involves this multi-layered approach. It starts with humility, recognizing both your ignorance about who you are and your ignorance about who you could become. It continues with careful, detached self-observation, watching yourself like you're studying a stranger, noticing patterns without immediately judging or defending them. It requires confronting your shadow, acknowledging your capacity for darkness and destruction, integrating these dangerous aspects into a mature, ethical personality. The journey demands that you set modest, achievable goals and build momentum through small victories rather than grand gestures. It asks you to sacrifice your arrogant ego, to be willing to look foolish, to start from wherever you actually are rather than where you wish you were. It requires continuous challenge and experimentation, pushing just beyond your current limits day after day, discovering through direct experience what you're capable of rather than theorizing about it. This entire process must be guided by the highest vision you can conceive, aligned with truth in speech and action, and undertaken with a sense of adventure despite the genuine difficulties involved. The isolation, alienation, and sorrow that accompany this path are real, but so is the profound meaning you'll discover. And that meaning, sense of living authentically and developing your potential, is the deepest satisfaction available to human beings. Walking this path means accepting that you'll never fully arrive at complete self-knowledge or perfect self-development. These aren't destinations, but directions. You're always discovering new layers of yourself, always finding new potential to develop. The process never ends, but that's actually part of what makes it meaningful. If you could complete the journey, if you could fully know yourself and completely develop your potential, what would be left? The ongoing nature of the work is what keeps life vital and engaging. Each day presents new opportunities for observation, for small challenges, for incremental growth. Each day you have the chance to be slightly more than you were yesterday. Not dramatically different, not suddenly transformed, but incrementally better. These small daily improvements compound over time into substantial change. The person you become after a year of daily 1% improvements is unrecognizable compared to who you were when you started. After 5 years, after 10 years, the transformation can be profound, but it all starts with that first step into humility. Initial admission that you don't actually know yourself as well as you thought you did. From that uncomfortable beginning, everything else becomes possible. The journey of 1,000 miles, as the saying goes, begins with a single step. Before you can take that step, you have to be willing to admit you don't know where you're going, that you're lost and need to find your way. Only then can the real journey begin. Only then can you start discovering both who you are and who you might become. And there is no greater adventure available to us than this journey of self-discovery and self-development. No more worthwhile use of our brief time in consciousness than the continual effort to know ourselves and realize our potential.